Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating bipartisan framework from themoralgorithm.com. It's called the American Capital and Competence Act, and it's designed to get us ready for a future that, frankly, is coming at us way faster than most of us think.
And that brings us to the big question, the one that really gets this whole thing started. Some experts are putting a number on it. They think AGI, that's artificial general intelligence, could be here in the next 800 days. So, are we ready? I mean, really, what does our National Readiness Report Card actually look like?
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the hard data, the readiness report. Then we'll unpack this proposed solution, the American Capital and Competence Act, by looking at its three main pillars. And finally, we'll talk about what it all means for you and your family.
All right, let's get into it. And the first thing to know is that this framework argues its case not with opinions, but with numbers. It's all based on some pretty serious gold standard assessments of where we are right now. Okay, so take a look at this. This comes from a huge international study, and honestly, the results are pretty sobering. We're talking about nearly a third of U.S. adults having low literacy and numeracy skills. And here's the kicker. This isn't getting better. The numbers have actually gotten worse since the last time they ran the study.
And it's not just about reading and math, right? It's about our financial health, too. This chart shows that almost 1 in 5 households in the U.S. are what's called unbanked or underbanked. Think about that. That's millions of families stuck on the outside, paying billions, with a B, in totally unnecessary fees for things like payday loans or just to cash a check. And this one really stopped me in my tracks. When you dig into those stats, you find that only 12% of adults have the kind of high-level skills needed to really evaluate complex information. How are you supposed to navigate an AI-powered world full of deepfakes and complex data if you can't tell when a chart is trying to mislead you?
This quote from the source material just sums it all up, doesn't it? It frames the whole problem as this massive mismatch. We've built this incredibly complex, high-tech, level 5 economy, but a huge chunk of our population is working with what the report calls level 1 skills. And that gap, well, that's the crisis this act is trying to solve.
So, given that pretty stark reality, what's the plan? Well, that's where this proposal comes in. It's sponsored by Darren Lawson Hosking's website, themoralgorithm.com, and it's laid out as a practical, non-political blueprint with 3 main pillars.
Okay, pillar number 1. This is all about what the Act calls cognitive tools. Think of it like a massive software upgrade for our brains. The core idea isn't to teach people what to think, but to give everyone a reliable framework for how to think clearly and critically. So, how do they propose we do this? Well, they're digging up a classic idea called the trivium method. It's really just a 3-step process. First, grammar. You gather the facts, the what. Then, logic. You arrange them to figure out the why. And finally, rhetoric. You learn to communicate your conclusion, the how. In an age of constant misinformation, you can see why this kind of structured thinking could be a game changer.
But it's not just about abstract thinking. It's about making real-world decisions. And that's where this moral algorithm comes in. It's basically a simple 3-question gut check for any new idea or policy. Does it serve everyone? Would you be okay with it no matter who you were in society? And does it empower people or control them? It's like a simple checklist for fairness.
All right, so once you have the tools to think, what's next? Well, Pillar 2 is all about ownership. It's called universal capital. And the argument is simple. To really participate in a democracy, you need to have some skin in the game. You need some capital. So how does it work?
The proposal is pretty straightforward. It actually builds on a little-known law from the Trump administration, which is why the source calls it a Trump account. The idea is that every single baby born in the U.S. gets a $1,000 account seeded by the Treasury and automatically invested for them from day one.
Okay, but who manages all this? The post office. The plan is to use the massive trusted network of the USPS to offer basic banking. We're talking a simple debit card, a safe place to save, even small loans for teens to buy work tools. And the key is, there's no means testing. It's for every citizen, which could wipe out those predatory check cashing fees overnight.
Okay, so we've covered thinking tools and ownership. The third and final pillar tackles the big one, security. How do we adapt our social safety net for a world where AI is going to change the very nature of work? The old 20th century model just isn't going to cut it anymore.
This table really lays it out.
Instead of separate programs like Social Security and unemployment, the idea is to merge them into one single account that you own and control your entire life. And here's a huge change. It gets rid of the wage cap on contributions, which the proposal says fixes most of the long-term funding problems, while also making the retirement age much more flexible.
Now, an idea this big can sound a little overwhelming, right? But the plan isn't to just flip a switch overnight. It's a two-phase rollout. Phase 1 sets up the thinking tools and the capital accounts. Then, the really big changes to Social Security are timed to match what's actually happening with AI and jobs. It's designed to adapt to reality, not just guess.
And this really brings us full circle, back to where we started. The document frames the entire plan with this quote. The argument here is that the numbers we saw at the beginning, they don't have a political party. They're just facts. And this is a proposed solution based on those facts.
So let's boil this all down. What's the big takeaway? The core argument is that for a democracy to actually work in a super complex, AI-driven world, citizens need two things. You need the cognitive tools to understand what's going on, and you need the capital to have a real stake in the outcome. Without both, you can't really give informed consent.
Now, obviously, we've just scratched the surface here. If you want to really dig into all the details, the data, and the philosophy behind this, the source for everything we've talked about is themoralalgorithm.com. And the author, Darren Lawson Hosking, doesn't just want you to read about it, he wants you to use it. There's a tool on the site called One Voice. It's that moral algorithm we talked about. You can use it to start applying this exact critical thinking framework to the issues that matter to you.
And that brings us to our final thought, right back where we started. Forget about politics for a second and just ask yourself, are you ready? Is your family ready for what might be coming down the pike in just 800 days? Whether you agree with this plan or not, the question is real. This is a huge conversation, and it's one we all need to be having. So please, share this with your friends and let's get that discussion started.